Okay, we'll give it, I can see the numbers kind of going up. So let's give it a couple more minutes as some more people join. Okay, I think we're stabilizing here. So welcome everybody to today's talk with Martine on the successes and challenges and collaborations and some updates from the green team at Max Planck Institute for Terrestrial Microbiology. So today, during the talk, we haven't figured out how to get the questions running. So if you email info@greenyourlab.org with all of your questions, then we can, we'll be monitoring the inboxes so that we can ask Martine at the end of the presentation. So just to tell you a quick snippet about Green Your Lab. So we are a free network for anybody who wants to join, who's looking at starting a Green Lab program. We have kind of questions and answers, seminars and talks like this one, networking events. And what we're most proud of is our Green Lab best practices database, where all of our members have contributed to putting in their best Green Lab tips. So you can go to our website at greenyourlab.org and get invited to our network. We're also hosting this today with NESSE, which is a network of early career sustainable scientists and engineers. So it's a global movement to help young researchers come together and learn about and solve the most pressing challenges in sustainability today. So very, very excited to have Martine come and talk to us today. So Martine did her PhD at EMBL Heidelberg, where she was working on microfluidic methods for personalized cancer medicine. So that's where she first became interested in sustainability. Today, she works as a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute for Terrestrial Microbiology, and her focus is on solutions using biotech to help solve climate issues. She's part of the green team there, and she's been working to implement new changes to reduce energy and waste in her labs. And so we are so excited to have her here today to talk about kind of what she's been working on at the Max Planck. And I'm personally really excited to hear about what interesting things that they've come up with and successes that they've had. So again, if you have any questions for Martine during the presentation, please email info@greenyourlab.org, and we will be monitoring those and feeding them to Martine at the end for her to answer. So Martine, I think you can take it away now.
Great, thanks. Just to double check, do you hear my fan, or is the sound quality okay?
We hear it a little bit.
Okay, I'm just going to try and back away from the computer a little bit. Sorry, I think this program is somehow a bit struggling for my laptop, but hopefully if I keep my microphone near to me, then you mainly get that.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Cool.
So,
okay, take it away.
Great. Just going to share my screen. Sorry, I don't know how long we've been doing online calls, but somehow this is still always takes a minute. Great. Okay, so thanks very much for the invite. It's really nice to be here today. So to introduce my institute that I'm currently at, we are part of the Max Planck Society, and we're in the Marburg site, which is pretty much in the center of Germany. And like a lot of research institutes in Germany, we are in the middle of a forest at the top of a hill, which for me is really nice for sustainability work, because you get to see every day one of the things that you're kind of working to protect. So in terms of numbers, we are 12 full-time research groups, plus kind of core facilities and emeritus groups. And in total, that means there's about 350 people working here. If you try to understand the kind of impact that we have from a climate side, one number that could be useful is the number of ultra-cool freezers that we have, for instance. So we have 39 of those between our research groups, and these each have the same impact, or has the potential to have the same impact as a small household. So this is why it's so important that we as a research institute have this green team. And we have then been around since 2020. And I think one of our real strengths is that we are very interdisciplinary and at a lot of different kind of power levels within the institute. So we have people from admin, from the communications department, from the science department, and we have group leaders and PhD students. And this together means that we have a lot of different kind of angles and a lot of different routes to actually implement the work that we want to do. So in terms of the structure within the Max Planck here, we as the green team are the kind of grassroots side of the sustainability work. So we are entirely voluntary, and yeah, this tends to mean that people are there because they're very passionate about the work. But because we are not kind of the people making the main decisions in the institute, the kind of work that we can do is somewhat smaller scale actions. So making sure that there's recycled paper available for the printers, doing some actual planting in the beds around the institute. But on the other hand, we have the Sustainability Commission at our institute. And this is actually something that came from the Max Planck Society as a top-down requirement, that a group of kind of higher level people at the institute meet on a regular basis and discuss what could be done to improve the sustainability of the institute. And they're then able to make much larger decisions that kind of affect the whole institute. But because they are people who tend to be very busy in very high positions, they are often kind of very busy. And this is then why it's really important that we have a really good work between the Sustainability Commission and the Green Team. So we were able to propose projects that we think are worth doing and really kind of try and motivate that these come through. So I had my animations a bit messed up there, but the next point that I wanted to talk about is the Max Planck Sustainability Network, which we are part of as the Green Team. And this is a really, really valuable resource for us because here we're able to find out about work that's going on at all of the different green teams across the different institutes. And that means that if someone puts a lot of time and effort into one area of sustainability, we get to hear about it quickly, and it's unlikely that the same work gets produced over and over again. And they share this information via a yearly conference and also a Wikipedia site that's available within the Max Planck Sustainability Network. And I was this year at the conference. I thought it was a really, really nice experience, got a lot of really useful tips, and met some really great people. And so I thought I'd share one of the things which was super simple, which I thought was really worth thinking about, which is just that if you've performed an experiment in a particular way to reduce an environmental impact of your work, make sure that you mention this in the paper. On the one hand, it's a really nice selling point for your paper, but on the other hand, it's really useful to have a clear peer-reviewed document that shows that these sustainable actions don't negatively impact the experiments. In particular, this was in reference to these ultra-cool freezers that I mentioned previously. So normally these would be the kind of standard is somewhat minus 80 degrees. But this used to be minus 70 degrees, and there's no clear reason why this swapped between the two. And you can save 30 to 40% of the energy requirement if you go from minus 80 degrees up to minus 70 degrees. And this is always something that's a bit difficult to convince group leaders to take on board, because understandably they're worried about their samples, and they want to see kind of proof that their samples will be safe. So if we have a database of actually published results showing that this can be done, and it's just kind of a side point on your normal research paper, this would be really valuable for everyone. Another thing that I heard about recently through the Sustainability Network is this paper, Achieving Sustainable Transformation in Science, all about green grassroots groups. And I think this is really nice because this just gives some basic numbers that can be really useful if you try to motivate or talk to management. So they provided a series of different recommendations, and I will just share a few that really resonated with me. One of those is the use of digital infrastructure from the organization, so really kind of validating the organization's support of your grassroots group, but also just making it a lot easier for the grassroots group to share their message within the institute, and hopefully also connect with other grassroots groups. Another point that they wanted to emphasize was about inviting the green grassroots group into the decision-making process. And this is something that, as I just explained, the structure that we have is currently working pretty well. But it's clear to me at the moment that by being in these decision-making spaces, we're able to have a much bigger impact. And we're able to influence work that can kind of affect many different things that we would otherwise not be able to. Another point that they talk about is having a actually paid sustainability manager within the Institute. I think this is really, really important and something that's really encouraging to see that at the Max Planck Society, this is starting to get going a lot more intensely. So they are building up the number of people that they have within the Society's general sustainability team. And this kind of branches out then and goes to all the different institutes, which is really useful for us, and I'll talk a bit more about later. And the last of the recommendations that I'd kind of chosen was this reinvesting green cost-saving measures into sustainable measures. So this isn't something that we're doing yet, but I think it's something we really need to look into at our institute, because we are often funded to do things, but without a clear budget before, and there are some things which are clearly not going to be affordable for the kind of donations that they essentially give us to do our work. So the idea with this reinvesting is that you make a small saving and you could work out how much exactly that saved in costs. You could then say, for instance, if you first swap out your normal light bulbs for LED bulbs, then the amount of money that could be saved there could get reinvested in something that's maybe even a little bit bigger next time. And hopefully this would kind of snowball as each kind of cheaper thing gives you cost saving that can build up to bigger effects. So what was also really nice from this paper was that they talked about a few different stats about different groups that they'd talked to. And these groups were primarily in Germany, by the way. And I think this is, again, very useful for talking to management, because you can kind of start saying, well, look, 40% of groups do have funding to some extent. You don't want to be the one institute that's behind. We deserve to have funding. And also, if management is starting to talk about supporting and activating green grassroots groups, it's really useful to know what the biggest issues are for these groups. And that is primarily lack of time for people to do this work. So I know that one of the Max Planck Institutes has actually been able to get written into some people's contracts that they can spend up to 20% of their research time actually working on sustainability or diversity issues. And these are the kind of solutions that we really need in order to make progress at the scale that's required from the climate crisis that we're facing. So regarding the sustainability managers, I think this is really, really important because of the scale of change that we really need here. This requires that we really do the work to prioritize the high impact actions. I think this is something as a grassroots group is really, really difficult because one, you can tend to go for, as individuals, the work that you find particularly interesting, which can be really nice and valuable stuff, but it can also be a high amount of input in terms of energy and or effort from your side without having made as much of a difference as some other work might have made. So in terms of identifying what we should focus on, we are limited in terms of time and money that we can put into working these things out. Measuring things like electricity consumption can be very complicated. for instance, just to measure, two different fridges at different temperatures, you would need to open them both the same amount of time within the room temperature being the same temperature. This may not apply to fridges in another room. There's a lot of different considerations that you would need to take into account if you want to work out which areas are really costing the highest energy. And there's also trade-offs. So we also consider recently to get a tip washing machine. And I think we need to think quite deeply about try and understand what kind of chemicals are used for the washing there. And if from a kind of net sustainability perspective, what we save on energy, does that produce so much of a toxic chemical that this shouldn't really be done? And this is the kind of thought process that unfortunately just takes a lot of time and commitment. And we're also just not experts. So one of the most important areas is the whole kind of heating and cooling systems. So this is a recent screenshot from our Slack channel where the air conditioning was not working. And this was kind of causing panic in the lab because the temperature was going up and up and up in the room because the equipment produces a lot of heat and will withstand a room that is too hot. But also your experiments are then not reliable if the room and the temperature in the room continues to increase throughout the course of the experiment. So normally in labs, there's a lot of energy put into maintaining a stable temperature, but also ventilation to ensure that the air is kind of safe, basically. So actually, depending on where you look, but you normally come up with the stat of about 60% of the laboratory's energy consumption being attributed to these heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. So related to that, just in case you're not aware of this, these fume hoods that we often have, particularly these kind of biolabs, are hugely costly in terms of energy. So if left open when they don't need to be, they massively increase the flow rate of air through them. And this uses a lot of energy. So please remember to shut the sash. Talking about, again, these full-time sustainability reps, this is something where at the Max Planck Institute we've been very lucky because we've recently got a new person who is employed full-time to deal with exactly this, these kind of HVAC systems. Exciting things to work on. We came up with a series of measures which, when all of them would be implemented, would be able to reduce the energy use in our institute by up to 30%. And by comparison, if we would cover the entire roof of our institute with solar panels, that would cover less than 5% of our energy needs. So I think for me, this really iterates why these kind of HVAC assessments, but in general, prioritizing work is important. So maybe just to share a few of the things that we were recommended by this sustainability expert. There was a series of pumps in the basement which run all these HVAC systems, which are basically so old that even once you take in the embodied carbon costs of new pumps, it was much more efficient to get new pumps. We also want to assess the need for various 3-degree and 37-degree rooms that are around at the Institute. So these also take up a lot of space. And if we could identify, for instance, a 4-degree room that could be emptied and the stuff in there just put into different fridges, then we even have a whole new room that's available to do work in, which would be really valuable for us. We're also no longer heating stairwells within the Institute, so rather we heat the individual labs and the spaces in between are not heated. And that's actually part of a German government regulation at the moment because of the gas prices. Because we are paid by the German government, it's no longer allowed to do this kind of wasteful thing as heating a stairwell. We also identified that we're actually providing hot water to all of the labs on a regular basis, even though no one is using hot water in the lab. And unfortunately, this is, it's a shame that this has been happening. It's very wasteful, but it's the kind of thing that you don't notice if you don't do a kind of thorough survey of all of these processes. And the scientists are not really thinking about what kind of energy use goes into this, and the people who do this kind of maintenance and provide the HVAC system don't know what we need. So this is a kind of, one of these disconnect issues where insufficient communication can mean you just miss big things where you can make big savings. And finally, this is something we look into. This still needs to be kind of looked into with the safety department in particular, that normally the air exchange in the lab would be up to 8 times the entire volume per hour. And this could be massively dropped at the times in which people are not in the lab. And again, this would save a lot of electricity. So another issue that was brought up during this assessment was this issue of kind of excess equipment, this build-up of more and more versions of new shiny things, which unfortunately often happens when a grant is just running out or at the end of the year. There's a bit of money left in a budget and it needs to be somehow spent, otherwise it's wasted. And group people think that it will look bad if they don't spend this money because it looks like they didn't budget well. So often what happens is that new equipment is bought, whether or not it's really needed. So in the best case, what could be done is to have a sustainable infrastructure list, basically. And in these moments when there's kind of excess money, if, for instance, you needed to use radioactivity in your project that was paid for by this grant, and the radioactive lab has a really old fridge that is so old that it's actually really, really inefficient and it's very much worth changing, then this money could go into replacing that fridge. And if this kind of investing in sustainable infrastructure doesn't work, then another thing that we could and should think much more about is outsourcing tasks. So this is actually something that I know, not related to the Green Team, but in my group was done last year. So this can often be quite expensive, but at the same time, the time that is spent by an individual, for instance, to clone something very complicated may take a lot of time. And if this can be just outsourced to a company, this often is actually also a more sustainable option because these companies will have a very smooth pipeline to do this work, and therefore they won't have to do as many repetitions of it, and it will work just very efficiently. So this is also another option if if your PI at the end of the year is talking about just buying something because the money is there. So another thing that we are doing at the moment is just basically generally trying to raise awareness of different things that can be done in the lab, where individuals can make small changes to save energy or produce less waste, for instance. And we start with 2 different one being who's kind of aware of all of this to check what's actually already happening in the lab, what could we improve on, and they're kind of a go-to point within that lab for people to discuss whether or not they're happy with these new ideas being implemented, and also to kind of convince people a little bit. And this is also only something which works when those sustainability reps also have kind of a next level to go to, which is our monthly meetings, where we can just come together quickly and talk about what's going well with these implementations. If there are concerns in the lab, for instance, we've had our first meeting last month, and there was a discussion of turning refrigerators to 8 degrees instead of 4. And one group was a little bit nervous about this, and another group was able to say, we've been doing this actually for years, and it's been fine. So this kind of peer-to-peer knowledge sharing is really useful because you kind of are much more likely to believe this when someone from your own institute tells you they've been doing this. And you can then ask, more details if that's needed, or, test keeping your reagents at that temperature. So this is, I think, going to be really productive. And it's also an idea that we'd heard from other labs at the Sustainability Network meeting. Another thing that we will do at the end of the month is, at the end of October, is actually for all the new PhD students, we'll have a short session where we kind of talk through all of these different things that we would recommend doing, just so that people, when they first start, have these things in mind and can try and implement them as they're developing their processes for their projects. One other thing we shared just for kind of general best practice is a kind of sustainability in home office. And this is mainly because obviously there's a lot of flux in science. You're often only there for a few years. And Marburg in particular has a huge number of different initiatives and organizations which try to basically make it easy and enjoyable to have a more sustainable lifestyle. So we wanted to share kind of information about local government grants that allow you to get, for instance, solar panels for your roof. There are repair cafes and secondhand stores that you might not immediately know about when you first move in, and we give information about that. There's also this great scheme where you can get for free these e-bikes, which can carry up to like 6 crates of beer or so. And these are completely free to use, but again, if you don't know about them, you clearly can't. So we just try and share this information. And also a few kind of smaller points that one can easily do just for simple stuff at home, like using Cozy as your search engine, checking whether your bank account is sustainable or whether the bank you use is actually investing in fossil fuels. So this group bank.green gives really useful information there. And we also recommend some local restaurants that are particularly good for vegetarian and vegan food. We also have subgroups within the green team. One of those is the mobility team, which so far has been mainly focusing on cycling. But one simple thing we did is just on the directions for how to get to the Institute, we basically swapped the priorities around. So the first thing that comes up when you look at how to get to the Institute is no longer this is how you get there with the car or a taxi. It's rather how you get there with the train and the bus, because as long as you're coming during normal working hours, the bus options are really good. And further down this directions, we've now added a list of different bike routes, which allow you to see, if you're coming from different areas near the Institute, how you could get there. Particularly because we go through the forest, it's very helpful to know what routes other people take and what's kind of recommended. To further support biking, we've also provided a bicycle pump. We're in the process of getting an e-bike to be used by a company as a company vehicle, taking part in the Stadtradeln competition, which is just about people publishing how much they've been cycling and trying to compete to increase that amount. And we hope to organize some bike repair sessions in the near future. So finally, we have one other subgroup that I would mention today, which is our biodiversity team. And that's trying to make sure that the spaces around our institute offer kind of space for biodiversity to exist. And I think the most successful part of this biodiversity team's work since I've been here is this amazing collaboration with the Urbanität und Vielfalt group, which are from the botanical gardens. This roughly translates to be urban biodiversity. So they have basically a list of grasses and very local plants which are actually endangered in the area, but are a really key part of the biodiversity here. And they've been giving these plants out for free at events in the city. And we were able to host then one of these events here at the Institute. And now we're going on to the next stage of our collaboration, in which we plant some of their plants in the flower bed at the front of the Institute. And we will also actually work on a kind of wasteland that is the leftover from a construction site, where we will plant more of these grasses, also to kind of raise awareness of the need for biodiversity and planting local species. And finally, we also managed to put up some stickers, which should stop birds colliding with windows. These are those kind of UV stickers that you can't see by eye, but the birds should be able to see. But I will add that we also found out at this sustainability conference that actually one of the best things you can do is to just not clean the windows as much, because this leaves them a bit dustier, and then the birds are able to detect that something there, and this saves everyone time and money. But it's just whether you can convince your institute that this is an option. So that's everything that I wanted to share, and I'm open for questions if anyone has any. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Martine. That was such a wonderful. Thank you so much, Martine. That was such a. So a few points that I thought were really interesting. So that Martine, just to summarize, not to summarize because she had so many great tips, but these were the ones that resonated with me most. is to do a thorough survey of the lab and where things are coming in. She was suggesting, for example, nobody was using the hot water in their labs, and yet they were still heating and pumping it through. So just going through a thorough survey. Also, she was talking about mentioning some of your Green Lab kind of strategies in your papers if you've used them. And actually, I was just talking to Professor Paul Grogan from Queen's University in Canada, and he's trying to also tell people to put in this, if not in the paper itself, but in the appendix or in the kind of greater information. To have a sustainable infrastructures list when you have all this money left over at the end of grants. I'm sure so many of us have experienced this and we don't know what to use it, so we just buy tons and tons of consumables that we might never use. The other one is to onboard kind of early, so you can share the information early so that people know what kind of resources are available. They start planning them in as they're developing their PhD projects. And I love the one with the UV stickers on the windows for the birds. That is so cute and so awesome that you do that. And of course, don't clean the windows. It's such a simple, easy, and sustainable solution to also help the biodiversity in your area. So we do have some questions coming in. But before I move to questions, I just want to take a moment to thank two volunteers who have been essential to organizing today's seminar. So one is Abby, and the other is Samladik. They've done the heavy lifting to get this event organized today. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank them while you are sending in your questions. So Martine, are you ready for the questions?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the first one is, so it says, awesome you got it's awesome that you got a full-time sustainability manager. Other than cost savings, what reasons did you use to convince the administration to put in money for this full-time sustainability manager?
Yeah, so I will say, I mean, maybe that wasn't clear from my side, but the Max Planck Society has, I've lost track completely of how many sites we have, but at least, 30 across Germany. So the sustainability manager is based in the central kind of site of the Max Planck Society. So she's not specific to our institute. And this is, I think, mainly pressure from kind of, public image that the Max Planck Society has agreed to have a net zero goal. And somehow they have to get there, right? And I think at the moment, almost all of our institutes are, like, not just within the Max Planck Society, but at all research institutes, we're very, very far away from doing this just because of the nature of the work that we do. So I have to say that personally, we are not responsible for her existence. But my understanding is that that's the kind of reasoning, is that, we've made a commitment, we now have to get that, basically.
Great. So just a reminder, email your questions to info@greenyourlab.org. Okay, so the next one is, so this person is saying that you have a very interesting green team and sustainability commission structure. Do you think it would also work in an industry setting? And let's start with that first. It's a multi-part question, so.
I'm really sorry, the connection seems to have lagged out for a second there.
Sure, they were saying that, do you think the green team structure that you have would also work in industry?
I don't see why not. I mean, I think from the way it's currently working, I think it works quite nicely for us because there are always going to be people who are very motivated and excited about this work, and that's the kind of green team. And then there are people who are theoretically very much supportive, but are kind of so busy that it's very difficult for them to kind of think of new ideas and really like research if they make sense. And I think that, I mean, in a way I don't see why this would be any different in a company, that if the company kind of sets some commitments to sustainability and would have some kind of regular meeting process in which they would have people who really make big decisions, then I think it works quite nicely to have the people who are super motivated show up and kind of pitch and present what they want to be implemented, and the people who are supportive but busy can kind of then just take this on and filter through what they want to use. I think this should work anywhere, to be honest.
And have you heard of any examples of businesses tackling sustainability issues in this way?
Not specifically, but I mean, somewhat related to that. I know that, for instance, at Ecosia, it is supported that part of your work, if you want to spend time doing sustainability work separate to your job, which is already working for a sustainability company, this is supported. And I think this structure is really key for grassroots groups to work. So I think in our institute, one thing that's really important is that our directors are really supportive. So it's totally understood that this is important to us and that we might spend some work time on this, even if it's not explicitly written in the contracts. I think this is something that both at a company and a research level needs to be the case, that there is support for you to spend some working hours on this. And only then, once you can then have these grassroots groups, would this structure work, I would say.
Okay, so we have a few questions about you mentioning turning fridges up from 4 degrees to 8 degrees. So just kind of, could you tell us more about it? Is it for certain reagents or in general? They were saying like the minus 80s, where you can kind of generally just take it up to minus 70. Is that what you can do for fridges as well, or is it special?
So when we first started thinking about doing this, we found one group at the Institute who's had their cold room at 8 degrees, for years. I think they said at least 10 years, and they do this, they put everything in there. And also when you look at the reagents, at least everything I've looked at so far, it always has this temperature range of 4 to 8 degrees. So the only concern that we had in the most recent sustainability reps meeting is that if the sensor in the fridge is somehow not exactly accurate and it thinks it's at 8 degrees, but it's actually at 9 or 10 or something, then, you might have issues. But I think if you can check that your fridge is accurately measuring its own temperature, basically, then you should be able to put everything in there, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
And this is even for your biological samples, not just reagents?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything that can, as far as we're aware, anything that you would normally store already in a fridge, it shouldn't make much of a difference. But I think you can also do this in gradation. So at least when I was kind of checking a bit around this, when people talk about their home fridges, you save, no, I've forgotten but each degree already makes a difference, right? So if you would decide to go to like 5 or 6 degrees, if you're still kind of, just wanting to be cautious, then that would already be helpful, I think. And
checking the temperature in your fridge is easy, right? Just put another thermometer in, right? Just to be sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were talking about awareness. Oh, it says awareness sheets. So the ones from the home office resources and the changes and the change from 4 to 8 degrees that you guys have, is that publicly available for other labs to try?
Yeah, we can happily share like our resources. I don't have to do this afterwards. But the list of stuff to do in the lab is pretty generic. I can happily also share the home office stuff, but some of that is more Marburg specific. But yeah, there's a few things that are generic on there that could happily share. Great,
yeah, you can email them to me and then I'll email them out to the list of attendees today. Yeah, and then, so what change do you think would make the most impact if you had unlimited time and budget?
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, I think the main thing would be having a full sustainability officer at every institute, because I think this is just, we're doing what we can, and I think we're making really good progress, but there's just so many things you could look into, and the more people doing this full time, being able to look into the numbers, the better, I would say.
Great. So those are all the questions that we had in. If there's anybody else with the last remaining questions, please press send on your email so that I can see them. If not, we will let Martine go. Thank you so much, Martine, for your talk today. It was so useful and so, illuminating with all the things that you're working on at the Max Planck, as well as some of the challenges that you face. So that, because I think a lot of us who have been working in the green lab space knows that it's always a little bit of an uphill battle sometimes, and it's nice to hear that other people have faced challenges and had some ways to solve it as well. So that's been wonderful. Okay, one more refresh on the emails to see if anybody else has, I think that's it. So yeah, so Martine, is there any other remaining last words that you'd like to say?
Nothing in particular. It was nice to be here, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the talk. So
great.
Thanks for
okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today, and thank you, Martine, for her time and energy in preparing the presentations. And yeah, so we will see you next month for our next edition of our Green Talk. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.